Now, the government's been criticised for rejecting a proposed working definition of Islamophobia that's been adopted by several parties, including Labour, the Liberal Democrats and the Scottish Conservatives. The definition was set out in a report published by a cross-party group of MPs in December, and a parliamentary debate on the issue will take place later today. The government said the definition needed to be given further consideration. Well, let's speak to Pegam Mustafa, author of The Quran, God's Message to Mankind, and an Islamic scholar. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Pegam, do you agree with this definition? It's Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness.
Well, I think, first of all, I have to say that this definition, which is going to be debated today, is a bizarre definition. And anyone who knows anything about Islam will know how crude and clumsy this description is. So I don't agree with it at all.
Why do you say it's crude and clumsy?
Well, it's crude and clumsy because what exactly is Muslimness? You know, this doesn't describe anything at all, because many things that people do in the name of Islam have no basis in the Quran. The sole criteria for judging what is Islamic and not Islamic. So these include female genital mutilation, honor killings, Sharia law, etc. If non-Muslims revile these actions, then they're hating things that are not Islamic. And if Muslims defend these things, then they're defending things that are not Islamic. This has nothing to do with Islamophobia, and to conclude otherwise is willful ignorance.
We've got people like Anna Sarwar, the MSP, who's obviously very focused on tackling Islamophobia, says that it's not about stopping criticism of Islam or creating blasphemy laws. It's about the everyday prejudices faced by Muslims or people who are perceived as Muslims. I mean, it is an issue, isn't it? So how would you deal with it?
Well, the thing is this, the Quran says that people should become benefactors of mankind through self-development, and they become useful members of society through good conduct. Now, who can disagree with this? What this description, the definition is trying to say is that perceived Muslimness. So if I was to criticize somebody for wearing the burqa or the hijab or whatever, then would that be Islamophobic?
Well, this is the question, isn't it?
No, well, I say it wouldn't, because none of these things are in the Quran. They're not mandatory, they're not Islamic, so why should people be defending them?
But I suppose the issue is that the people who may, be prejudiced or be abusive to someone doesn't know the ins and outs of the Quran, doesn't even know whether someone that they, say something to is a Sunni Muslim or a Shia Muslim, and they don't care either. But yet, it's not right that they're allowed to do that. So it still raises the question of how do you tackle this? If those throwing the abuse are taking a very broad brush approach, is it maybe not a broad brush approach that we just need to tackle it?
Well, I think instead we need to be asking the question, why do Muslims attract so much negative attitudes? If Muslims behaved according to the Quran, would it then be possible for them to be seen in such an abject way? Muslims cannot say that their conduct aligns with the Quran, and yet people consider them to be terrorists, paedophiles, misogynists.
But that's ignorance on the part of other people, making that assumption, isn't it?
Well, it's not just other people, it's Muslims themselves who pay very little attention to what the Quran is actually saying, and more to tradition and culture.
So what is the way forward for dealing with, these incidences that take place in our society?
Well, we have to expose these incidents because racism of any description is bad. But what people need to do is to educate people about what is in the Quran rather than what tradition says, because you can't say that racism is Islamophobia, which is what this description is saying, because these two are two entirely different problems.
Okay, so you think extremism then, in other words, perpetuates this?
Of course, yes. People who are ignorant of what the Quran says or are twisting the Quran verses to suit their own agenda.
Thank you very much for talking to us this morning. That's Pegam Mustafa, who's an Islamic scholar and has written The Quran, God's Message to Mankind. 21 minutes past 8.